I got lost. I got trapped in this coral reef and nobody knew I was there. I went through all of these levels. I could feel all, I mean, it was like a life review. And then I realized I wasn't going to make it out. I consciously gave it up. And in that moment, there was a flash of light. And I saw the self that I'd been trying to fix, change, heal, and improve all my life. And I suddenly saw he was just a figment of my imagination.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where influential conscious leaders come to share the real story behind their spiritual journey and how they're helping others awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I want to share with you an exciting conversation with Derek Rydall. He is the best-selling author of Emergence, 7 Steps for Radical Life Change, and his forthcoming book called A Whole New Human, which I believe will be a best-selling book as well. Now, in this conversation, we talk about how he nearly died twice, and those 2 experiences helped him wake up to the reality of who he already was inside. He talks about how self-improvement, self-help, personal development can actually be a trap that never helps us experience the true life change that we're really looking for. And then he uses this metaphor that I found to be extremely helpful. It comes from his book, Emergence, about how an acorn doesn't try to become or work hard to become an oak tree. It doesn't try to attract an oak tree. It already has the blueprint, the essence, the DNA within it to simply emerge as an oak tree. And he shares with us how this metaphor can help us in our own lives as well. Now, if you enjoy spiritual conversations that go beyond the surface, you're in the right place. And I would encourage you to subscribe however you're watching or listening, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music. Click subscribe, leave a rating or a review. That's an easy way for you to help us spread the word about these inspiring interviews that we release each and every week. And share it with a friend. Somebody you know is going to love this conversation with Derek. All right, let's dive into my conversation with Derek Rydall. Derek, thanks so much for taking time to hang with us today. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you too, man.
Yeah. I want to hear about these 2 experiences that I know happened over the course of a decade of your life where you, as you said, almost died twice.
Yeah.
Take us to those different seasons of life, what happened and how that helped you in this process of awakening to a new way of living, a new way of seeing the world.
Yeah, very much so. A 180-degree turn. Like so many people, I spent many years in self-improvement and trying to attract and achieve and fix my childhood and figure it all out. What's wrong with me? What's broken with me so I can fix it? And after so many years of all of that therapy and self-improvement, the only thing I'd improved was my ability to describe why my life was so screwed up, right? I could tell you when I was 10 and my dad looked at my report card and it was all A's and a B. And he was like, "What's with the B, son?" Well, that messed me up. And so
Wait,
I could,
do we have the same dad?
yeah,
I'm
I think
confused.
I thought you seemed familiar, brother. So there was a lot of that. And I got so frustrated in this self-improvement. It was like trying to dig myself out of a hole, which is a bad strategy. You just get deeper and deeper in the hole. And eventually it drove me to become so frustrated. I got involved in drugs and addicted to alcohol and drugs. And then I had a very serious overdose and almost died. And in the emergency room, when I came to consciousness, and the IV is snaking out of my arm. The doctor said, "You're really lucky to be alive." And I didn't feel lucky. I didn't know how all of my self-improvement had gotten me to this place, literally. And I just figured I need to work harder or maybe work smarter and learn how to attract better and all of that. And so I doubled my efforts, redoubled. And like any time you kind of start again, things seemed to go good for a while and there was some momentum. And then I was an actor at the time also, and I got this movie and I was doing a movie in Jamaica. And everything fell apart again. And they fired most of the cast, had to redo the whole movie. There was a lot of on-set politics, typical, but still I'm like, really? After all of this, it's all happening again? And I remember praying. I went diving in a coral reef and I prayed to get lost from everything above. So be careful what you pray for, kids, because it does work. Just you get what you pray for. And I got lost. I got trapped in this coral reef and nobody knew I was there. And it looked like an underwater booby trap tomb in an Indiana Jones movie. Fire coral on all sides, couldn't touch the walls, spiked coral all beneath me, like tall, razor sharp spikes. If I went down, I'd be skewered. If I tried to look up out of the water, I'd be skewered. I was stuck, I was trapped, and nobody was coming to save me. And it eventually started to get dark. I mean, it was terrifying. And I, prayed to my idea of a God. I promise I'll go to church on Sunday if you get me out of this. And God was not playing Let's Make a Deal that day. And I went through all of these levels. I could feel all, I mean, it was like a life review, all of the mistakes, all of the stupidity. And I was so angry and so frustrated. And then I went through all of that and came back around with such sadness and grief and compassion. It was just a complete life review. And then I realized I wasn't going to make it out. And it's hard to understand. It's not like, oh, I hope I do, or this is really bad. There was a moment where it was very clear, I'm going to die today. And all that was left, I was exhausted. All that was left was true and unconditional surrender. Not I'll surrender so that, it was just, I consciously gave it up. And in that moment, there was a flash of light. And I saw the self that I'd been trying to fix, change, heal, and improve all my life. And I suddenly saw he was just a figment of my imagination. He was a amalgamation of peer pressure, parental fantasies, societal conditioning, and nothing I would ever do would ever make him enough. At the same time, I saw or sensed this other self. And this other self had never been damaged or diminished, so he didn't need to be fixed or healed. And it was already whole and complete, so it couldn't be improved upon. Now again, this was a flash. It was like,
And you're underwater at this point.
I'm underwater at this point. And then in the next moment, I remember some movement, but I don't know how exactly. In the next moment, I was out of the water, out of this labyrinth of coral, standing on top of a piece of coral about this big, the only one that was protruding out of the water. Somehow I got on top of there. I don't know how. And I'm looking down where I'd just been trapped for this whole ordeal. And first of all, the exit had always been just a few inches to this way. I just couldn't see it. And I saw the whole coral reef, and it was a maze, and it was a metaphor for all of my life, following all these brightly colored things and gasping for air. I'd been drowning for a long time. I just didn't know it. And in that moment, something literally drowned. And now I was standing outside and everything was shimmering. There was luminosity and light behind everything. And I knew the guy that was about to jump over the other side and be free was not the guy that swam into that coral reef. And I swam away, and I had a profound cathartic experience that night in my hotel room. Without going into all the details, well, I'll just share one little piece. I was on my knees, and suddenly it was like some hand reached inside and pulled out years of grief. And I began to sob, and I fell forward. And I fell forward like this far forward, and my hands were caught. Something caught my hands. And I know I don't share this very often, but I figure for the awakened people, you can hear these kind of stories. And I was caught and I was held as there was I was like a lifetime of food poisoning, of this poisoning of my heart and mind was just poured out of me. And then I fell asleep. And when I left that movie, I left everything and I went and became a monk. And the monk life didn't last very long, at least in an actual monastery. I'd never done it. I was silenced, fasting, and about a week or two in, I freaked out. I broke into the monk's kitchen, stole food out of the refrigerator in the middle of the night, just opening it just enough so the light didn't go on because they were right down the hall. I can still see the little light bulb there. And I'm grabbing, and who knows what I was eating, bird food, cabbage, I don't know. And I went back into my little cell of a room and had a got violently sick, and then had my first ever, but first in a long line of out of body experiences. And I was flying around above the monastery, and I was being tormented by these other spirits. And I'm pretty sure it was the monks saying, "Get out of here, kid. You don't belong here." And I pretty much packed up and ran screaming out of the monastery. And I ended up cloistering myself in my apartment, got rid of all my books, got rid of TV and media, just a few spiritual books, the Bible and maybe Buddhist text. And I just went on an inner retreat for the next couple of years.
How old were you at the time?
I was in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
so just a few years ago.
Yes.
And so I went on that journey to understand what had happened to me. Something dramatic had happened. Humpty Dumpty had fallen off a wall, and I couldn't put him back together again. There was no going back. There was only going inward and maybe forward. And what I eventually discovered, what I called ultimately the law of emergence, was that I saw again that this self was already perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to see in all of nature, in every seed, there's a pattern. And the acorn does not improve itself into an oak tree. The acorn doesn't attract an oak tree. It doesn't achieve oakhood. It's not an empty shell that goes and gets a bunch of pieces and builds an oak. The oak is already there in its pattern. And in the quantum field, it's there in its entirety in frequency. Just like right now, your favorite music is playing, but you have to know what frequency it's playing on. And then you got to tune into that frequency. And the minute you do, that music or that station becomes manifest. You have a manifestation. And so, where was the music? Right here. Where was the oak tree? Right here. As Jesus said, "When's heaven going to come?" They asked. He's like, "It's not going to come." Like, oy vey, how many times do I have to tell you? It's here, but you're using your eyes so you can't see it. You're using your ears so you can't see it, hear it. You're judging by appearances, so you're missing it. Judge righteous judgment, spiritual discernment. It's here. It's now. That's the good news. So that was what I caught. And I'd been reading the Bible before, and it was like nonsense, didn't make any sense. Threw it across the room, used it as a doorstop. And suddenly I could read it and go, "Oh yeah, I get it. Yep. And Buddha, yep. Oh, same thing. They're all saying the same thing. There is a reality. It's already done. It's already whole. It's already complete. And all the efforts to get it, to make it happen, even to attract it, are static on the line and the resistance to a natural process of emergence. When we come into alignment and integrity with who we really are, what we're really made of and made for, it begins to emerge. And as I caught that over the next 12 to 18 months, my whole life emerged. I went from broken, suicidal, living in a one-room apartment, eating mac and cheese, and actually not even be able to afford that barely, to suddenly my purpose unfolding and business unfolding and money unfolding and love unfolding and just all the things that I was trying to make happen. Suddenly I just made them welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's easy, but that was the first flush of the growth of my pattern in a way that I began to understand and have been, continuing to understand ever since.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you sense that you were called to share or teach these principles to other people? How did that emerge in your life?
It's a great question because I never imagined. I was an actor, I was an artist, I was always a philosopher, and I was always two things. I want to know the nature of life. Somehow I believe there's more to life than meets the eye. And even as a kid, I wanted to know about everybody's religions, and I would like do this thing to my friends where suddenly this love would move through me, and they would call it a love bomb. And they didn't like it. They're like, "Dude, back off. Why are you loving on me so hard?" And so there was all this stuff moving through me as a kid to know truth, to know reality, to know myself, and then I would create something from it, art, music, whatever. So that was always there, but I never, ever, ever imagined. I didn't like teaching at all. I quit high school early to get out of teaching, and I didn't like books in terms of like, the idea of writing books. It's like, oh, I'm back in English class. And so it was shocking to me that all of a sudden, all of this stuff began to come through me. And again, I wasn't trying, but people began asking, what's going on with you? What are you doing? Something's changed. And I just found it being pulled out of me. And then this whole law of emergence thing emerged. And, I just began sharing it, and very quickly it began catching fire. And I was like, okay, I guess this is where I'm going now. So that's kind of
Mhm.
how it unfolded.
How did you
I'm
first
still resisting it,
Yeah,
Dave.
yeah. How did you first begin to share some of these principles? Like, in what context did that come out for you?
Yeah, again, it mostly came out, on accident, spontaneously, in an airport, in an elevator, sitting somewhere where I was just somebody who would just suddenly share their life story with me, and I would find myself saying something, and it changing them. And then there was other things that happened, like these, you could say mystical experiences. I was having a lot of dreams with Jesus, and a lot of dreams where I'm healing people, and like lots of healing, like hands, like I could see the energy and I could heal people. And I would wake up from these dreams. And I'd be like, no, I don't want that kind of attention. Thank you. I'm good. And then a couple experiences happened where, like, I had my sister one time, she had a really bad headache, and I could see it, and I just went, shh. And she's like, what did you just do? The headache's gone. I'm like, I don't know. Let's go play board games. And then another time, my mom, where she was scared that I was joining a cult. I'd started going to a church you may know of, Agape, with Michael Beckwith, who became a dear mentor of mine. And and she just was like, you're in a cult, and she was afraid for me. Everybody was afraid for me. And then many of my friends had left, and my brother thought I got a lobotomy, freaked out on Jesus or something. And she was on the phone, and she was having another really bad headache or something. And I said, I'm gonna just do some work for you, Mom. And I hung up the phone, and I dropped in this energy, and it's like, and she right away called me back. She said, what did you do? I don't know. The room started spinning, and all of a sudden, and all the pain's gone. And then she was about to come back home. She was living somewhere else. And I picked her up at the airport and drove her to Agape. And she's never left the path since. She's been on her own spiritual path and ended up working for me. So it came out very spontaneous at first. And then eventually, again, I kind of caught on and began to do little workshops, like at Agape or different places. And again, it grew. And, little by little, there was still the part of me that wanted to be the actor, that was still the artist. And I didn't want to get too spiritual, and that I wouldn't have anything else creative. You got to be suffering to create good stuff. So I didn't want to be totally healed. But it just kept pulling me. God's like doing its work behind your back while you're busy doing other things. And one day I looked up, and suddenly I had a community, and I had, books and different things. And I guess there's really something going on here. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Amazing. I want to talk with you about your book Emergence, since that's you've been talking about this theme of the acorn to an oak tree.
yeah.
The subtitle is 7 Steps for Radical Life Change. Would you mind just sharing with us those 7 stages, kind of walking with us through those briefly? And I assume the metaphor of that acorn will become even more powerful for us as we hear those.
Yeah, and I'll try to remember all seven. I mean, there's so many other steps and things that have unfolded, but the basic idea, again, to understand is that, and this is my belief, and it's what I see now as I study all the great teachings, is that life is already done. Like the work of life itself, not life experience, but whether you call it God, whether you call it, the Christ or the Buddha mind or the Atman or the Tao, and again, if you study all these teachers, you'll see they were saying the same thing. In the beginning was God, and God made all that was made, and all that was made with the word, and it was good, and it was done. And then you see the second book of Genesis, where now there's the human creation, and that's the unfoldment of the divine pattern, but through perception of an individual unfolding consciousness. And so as a result of that, it can emerge, not necessarily perfectly, but relatively and often distorted and all that. And you see, and the rest of the Bible is essentially the story of the unfoldment of our mental concept of reality and the experience of it. And then eventually the death and the letting go of those concepts until the final, you know, experience where Armageddon or the apocalypse, which means what was hidden is revealed. And Armageddon is the destruction, not of the actual world, but of our concepts of the world.
Mhm.
And then there's the rebirth of the real pattern, begins to emerge, in our life. So that's in general. Again, Buddha teaches it if you study it closely. All the great masters teach this.
So you said this is stage one in your book. It's called "See the Completed Vision." That's
Right.
what you're referring. So in our practical everyday life, what does that mean? How do
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
apply that as a step one?
Absolutely. And I get very high, 30,000 feet at first, and down the rabbit hole at first. Just people to get an understanding. You're not experiencing reality. You're experiencing your concept, your story, your belief about
Mhm.
reality. And and so the thing to understand is there is a pattern in you that the world didn't give you and that the world can't take away. And it already has all the mechanics and the blueprint for whatever metaphor you want to use. And and so we've been taught we're empty shells and we have to go out and build it and make it happen, everything I talked about. And what I discovered is instead, this is what Jesus said: take no thought for your life. Stop trying to make it happen and seek first the kingdom of heaven and that connection. So first you have to know, what is it I'm really made of and made for? Or put another way, at the Oracle of Delphi, the OG self-help guru, is know thyself. So you have to know yourself in order to be yourself. And if you're not being yourself, you are a branch cut off from the tree. You are like an acorn trying to be an apple tree, and you have no help from life. You're cut off. You're living in an illusion. And most of us are, to some extent at least. So I realized first step is you have to get in touch with what is that seed pattern, that divine idea, that platonic form that you're really made of and made for. And there's clues and there's ways to see the signal, like where's Waldo? You can see all the evidence, or that game highlight some of you might remember in doctor's offices where you're looking for all the hidden objects. Your life is filled with clues and signals of who you really are, what you're really made of, what you're really made for. Some of them look like the pain, and the pain pushes until the vision pulls. And some of them look like the illumination and the curiosity. And for whatever reason, I'm so interested in this and all of that. So I take people through a journey of getting back down to the factory settings, back down through the conditioning, as I said, the peer pressure, the parental fantasies, the societal conditioning, to what is it about me that nobody created, not even me. And you get down to that. Now, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just that's the journey, and it's a never ending unfoldment. So that's step one. See the completed vision. Know thyself. Know what you're really made of and made for. And then step two is like a seed. Now I know what kind of seed this is. It's an apple seed. It's an oak. It's an acorn. It's a kind of flower that needs more shade. It's a kind of flower that needs more sun, because that's good. If it needs more shade and I just put it out in full sun, it's not going to thrive and it might even die. If it needs a lot of water and I don't give it a lot, or it needs a little water and I give it too much, it's not going to thrive. So you need to know the seed to grow it. So knowing yourself is step one. Step two is create the congruent conditions, cultivate the soil of your soul, create a way of life, design a life inside first and then out that is increasingly a match for what you really are. And by the way, we do this naturally as children. We are drawn to the people, places, and conditions that are a match until the world tells us that's not right. Like, I don't want Aunt Julie to hold me. She smells like cheesecake or like a fruitcake. Or I just want to play in the dirt, Mom. Stop making me read. Or I just want to read, Dad. Stop making me work in the garage. And we just get pulled off of our radar and we lose ourselves. We start to create a self for survival and coping and keeping up with the Joneses. So this gets you back. And then now you start creating the conditions that are a match for that seed pattern. You are in integrity. You're no longer a house divided against itself. Now, that's again an ongoing journey, right? But that's step two. There's congruence now. I know there's something in me wants to come out. And now I'm beginning to align my thinking, my speaking, my conversations, my behaviors, my bank account, credit card, calendar, and conversations. They're starting to be congruent. I'm of one piece increasingly rather than fragmented. And that already starts the process. Something starts to emerge. And then step three is creating the quantum plan. And really what this is about is understanding creation requires constraint. And so you can't just try to be a bunch of things or be a bunch of things in any order you want. There's an organization and a sequencing, and there's proper structure, and there's narrow structure necessary. Whereas for some people they're obviously over planned, but for most people planning is a plan is a four-letter word, and they're planning for all this stuff, but the plan is not a reflection of the real purpose or pattern. So you start to organize, and I show people how to organize their life very specifically with the real things that are priority, with what matters most. And if you just get those first three things, your life starts to shift. It also starts to bring up a lot of the reasons why you're not doing it, the fears, the doubts, all of that comes up. And without going through all the steps, then once we bump into that, well, actually, the next step is about, I think it's called Act As If, and it's where the Awaken Wealth work came from. And I'll stop there for a moment, is the understanding that because it's already in you, whatever's missing is what you're not giving, what you're not expressing. As the Gospel of Thomas said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. So now you recognize, I don't have to wait for the world to change. I don't have to wait for anybody to change. I have to be the change I'm waiting for. If I want more love, if love is a quality of my purpose, I need to start opening the spigot and bringing love, or bringing more inspiration or joy or play or whatever the qualities are. Another way to think of it is I pull my future self forward, because it's not really in the future, it's really in me emerging. And I begin to live from that place and start circulating everything that I think I need. And then you find that suddenly your life opens up and there's more abundance and more flow, and all the things you were waiting for, trying to get, they start to emerge in the field, not just in you, as what looks like people coming and opportunities coming, but it's all coming from you. You're the source. The world is your channel.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
It's a
When you
lot.
talk, yeah, yeah, yeah. When you talk about the idea of there is a pattern within us, and then we're identifying all of this conditioning or parental, concepts that have been handed to us.
Yeah.
How do we distinguish between conditioning, parental authority, and what is actually our own passion, our own dreams, our own sense of purpose? How do you distinguish between all of that?
Yeah. And, as with any of these questions, we could teach a whole week long program on this. And I do, of course. But the first thing to understand is it's not about doing it perfect. And you're going to only really know. This is one of the most common questions you're asking. And it sometimes sounds like this: how do I know that it's not my ego versus my spirit? Right? My ego versus the truth. If I haven't heard that, if I've heard that 1,000 times, I've heard it, many, many thousands. And first of all, the answer is you can't. And what I mean by that is you do your best. You try to find where's the real desire. Desire means of the sire or of the father or of the stars. And it's basically telling you not what's out there that you want to get, but something is in here trying to get out. You're pregnant. And when you feel that burning desire, it's like the baby kicking. And so that's the first thing to understand. And you learn what that feels like in you by running the experiment. I feel like this is what's true. And so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to look back in hindsight and see how it's unfolding. And as it unfolds, I begin to look back and I begin to recognize what my inner instrument panel looks like, feels like, sounds like when I'm following it accurately. So that's one thing. Just like anything, how does a baby crawling say, how do I learn to walk? Just get up and fall down, kid. And then you learn to walk by falling. And eventually you catch yourself while you're falling, and you just catch yourself quick enough, and that's called walking. Literally, walking is falling forward, but catching. So you learn it by falling. And so in the same way, you learn this by failing, running the experiment, taking note. The other thing is and I can just say this in general, there's a quality to when you touch the thing that is true, and it feels expansive, even if it's covered up by also fear, doubt, worry, unworthiness. So, in other words, if I'm honest, I really want to write this book, or I really want to go have this relationship, or I really need to leave this relationship, or whatever. Like, I just know in the quiet of my heart that's true, but I'm so scared. It's really freaking me out. What if I'm not good? What if I fail? What if I look stupid? What if I get judged? I'm not good enough. I'm not ready. So you feel all of that, but if you get quiet, there's a little pulse. You begin to hear and sense, but often again, it's being smothered by, it's like getting choked off by the weeds, but this little flower is trying to reach for the light. So you learn that. But again, one of the things is it'll feel like a contraction as an initial response that you'll have to push through if it's not really true. And it'll feel like a little burst as the initial response if it's true. But again, it's nuanced because if you don't pay attention, you might only feel contraction because when you have to live your truth, if you haven't done it yet, if it's going to require real change, it is going to bump up against fear, doubt, worry, etc. This is how the ego works to keep us in our old map of reality. But if you feel it a little closer, you'll hear that still small voice going, yes, yes, I want this, but I'm terrified. No, it's stupid. You're going to die. So you have to learn to tune your inner ear. And again, you get better at it. And then sometimes you can't hear it at all. And you got to dig a deeper well, right? But and again, you run the experiment and you start to feel, you get to know yourself, you start to know your deepest values and what really matters. And then you start to organize your life again with the top values in at the top. And you just start to know more and more what's true. You know what I'm saying? And again, that's why knowing yourself is the first and the last and the forever master practice. Because the more you know yourself, the more you know this is real, this is true, this is a shadow, this is fear, this is my dad's ideas, these are the collective colonized beliefs. This is real, though. You start to really discern the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
I
la-
take people through various tools and processes to discern that and begin to untangle that.
The last stage, you call it waiting on the law. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's two kinds of waiting. And the first kind of waiting is most prevalent. And that is I'm waiting for something to get better. I'm waiting for me to not feel afraid. I'm waiting for me to feel confident, to be certain, to have visibility. I'm waiting for them to change, for the economy to change. So we know that waiting. And I call this the ultimate weight loss program. It's about losing all the weight because whatever you're waiting for, you're the one weighing it down and holding it back. Life never holds back from us. We hold ourselves back from life. Life is giving of itself completely. There's no withholding in life. It's our beliefs, our concepts, and our holding on to our old identities that blocks and denies the life that's trying to emerge in us. So that's a kind of waiting that's very common, right? And but there's a different kind of waiting. There's the kind of waiting where you've planted the seed and you've cultivated it and you've done everything, you followed that inner prompt just as far as you can go, including some of the difficult work you have to do to till the soil and work the soil and whatever. It could be a very hard job to plant a field or plant your life. But then there's a moment where you really have planted it and you really have honored it and watered it and fed it and cultivated it. But there's no plant there yet. There's no fruit there. There's no evidence any of this is working, right? If you were the first gardener ever, the first farmer ever, and some crazy person out of the forest said, here's some little seeds. What's a seed? Plant it and work for the next 6 weeks or whatever, planting these things and doing all this work and magic. And you'd be like, you're insane. And then, but eventually you do it and you do all this stuff. And then you're like, again, you probably wouldn't have a watch, but you'd be like, okay, this is weird. Nothing's happening. I just wasted all this time. I'm starving. I lost the hunt, missed that window. You would really, really be scared. And what you'd probably do is start digging it all back up again and looking at it and going, wait, is this working? And now you've just stopped the process and you have to do it all over again. And that's what we do, right? So there's a period in the planting, the sowing and the reaping, the harvesting, the cycle where you have to be still, where you have to trust. This is faith. Faith is the substance of that which cannot be seen, the evidence of that which does not appear yet, but it's real and it's substantial. And you have to realize that the real reaping is not when it shows up out there. There's a planting and a reaping that happens inside of you. Again, like the woman that's pregnant and she knows it. There's no baby yet. Nobody sees it. And before we had scans, and before the first woman ever had a baby, you'd be like, what are you talking about? You have a what inside of you? So, but there's a moment, like Michelangelo, when he was, the book about him, I forget, The Agony and the Ecstasy was written about Michelangelo. It didn't write about when he slew Goliath and cut his head off and was holding the head up, which was typical of the day. It talked about the moment when he was still just that boy, but he saw the vision and he knew he would, and that he could, and that he would win. And there was a moment where it was already done inside of him. He already had conquered Goliath before he stepped on the battlefield, which is another reason why he was able just to show up with a little pebble and a slingshot and go, come on, big guy, watch this, because he already had won. And so there's a journey through this process where you already have arrived, you've already reaped the harvest, and you're whole, you're complete, you know it's done. And then there can be a period of time where if depending on where you are in the growth cycle, you have to keep knowing and keep holding and sometimes come back, because you're building the field of dreams within you. You're building the kingdom of heaven within you. The only place we really live is in consciousness. We don't live in a world. We live in consciousness, and we only experience our consciousness. That's it. And so you're building it in the only place it matters and the only place you can take with you. So as this process goes, you keep building it. And then you are able to walk with insight, judge by insight, not by eyesight. The world's like, and that happened for me many times. My mom's like, you've joined a cult. My dad's like, you're going to be broke as an artist. My brother's like, you've lobotomized, and friends were leaving me and calling me crazy. But I knew, I saw, I was already somewhere. It can feel like a desert, but that's why it's also called the promised land, because the promised land means there's nothing there yet, but it's full of promise. And so that's what that waiting on the law is. You begin to, and again, these steps are not one and done. They're all principles of a lifetime, where you're constantly knowing yourself. You're constantly having to come into an integrity at a higher level. You're constantly having to be willing to circulate more and more love and forgiveness and generosity way beyond the appearance. You're constantly needing to embrace all the broken parts of you, seemingly, to love the enemy, to love all the stuff you've rejected. And then eventually you're having to the more you rise up in this, the greater opportunity you'll be given. But that greater the opportunity, the greater the strength of that faith, of that capacity to wait upon the Lord, to be still and know that I am in the midst of the mighty, to build that consciousness that you've seen the great masters build throughout time. Even a Mandela, in prison for 27 years, he did not become president and end apartheid after he left prison. He became president and ended it while he was in prison. In the silence of his soul, he became the captain of his fate, or the captain of his soul and the master of his fate. And it was done. And then the rest was just the catching up of the details. And he had the fortitude to put on forgiveness tribunals. That's not just the law of attraction outcome. That's like he has embodied something. He's living in a different dimension. And that's what this eventually, as you keep cycling up the emergence spiral, is what you build. And I'll say one little personal story. I've gone through a lot of pain and loss. Divorce after 23 years, a loss of a fortune, almost my whole fortune stolen from me, my child dying, my son dying. and my daughter transitioning into a boy, which I'm not saying is a bad thing necessarily, but it's a hard thing for a parent, especially after you've lost your son and then your daughter becomes something else. And then all of these different experiences, and then wife getting cancer. But what I can tell you is that because of this process, as the form of what held my life was shattered, the life wasn't lost, it was liberated. And I had the chance to find it again for real. The real love, the real companionship, the real abundance, the real truth in the only place it ever has been, and the place the world can never touch. And as a result of that, as these things are shattered and broken, that's another kind of waiting and allowing me to eventually hold that and reclaim that was seemingly lost, and be able to now bring that regardless of the appearances. So whether it's about positive so-called abundant outcomes, or moving through the losses in life, which are inevitable, this process allows you to carry more, to hold more, and to become increasingly freer. And again, I'm still very much a baby in it. No matter how much I've done, I'm very aware of it. That's the other thing I'll say is, the more you know and the more you do this, as I'm sure you know, David, is the more you know almost nothing. The more humble you get, right?
Very true. Very true. You have a brand new book coming out in January 2026 called A Whole New Human. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about this new work.
Yeah, as if I didn't have enough to work on. But no, yes, this was another one of those interesting visions that came to me unexpectedly, just like I never planned on being a teacher or a coach or any of that kind. I never planned on writing books, any of that. And in this I had this experience before COVID happened, where there was like this first time in my life what I would call a prophetic feeling. And it's a very different feeling than just an inspiration. It's an inspiration that is dark. It's, if there's such thing as dark inspiration, and it is, and because it was expansive but foreboding, and I was telling people something big is coming, it's going to be bad, and people thought I was Chicken Little and being weird, and I started to see it coming. I'm like, get your life in order, slow down, simplify, and very few people wanted to listen to me. And then COVID hit and it changed the world. And so that happened again with a few years, I don't know, 4 or 5 years back, before AI, ChatGPT, all that stuff was mainstream and hit. In fact, I started talking about it about 6 or 7 years ago. But I was sitting in meditation one day, and the voice came through and said, "Build an ark. The flood is coming." And it was like, and it grabbed me and it showed me a complete transformation of the world. And I'm not like, I used to be into technology as a kid. I was a programmer and I was building stuff, and I was going to be a neuroscientist and all these things. So I have a lot of background and interest, but I'm like, why me? Why are you talking to me? And it began to show me that, first of all, the rise of AI and super intelligence, and the embedding of it in all of our life, which is already happening in many ways, just most people aren't aware of it. It's every time a new technology emerges, we outsource a part of ourselves, and over time we lose it. So we've lost cognitive abilities and connection and communication abilities, with all the way back to the wheel when we stop walking as much. And then obviously with Amazon now, you're certainly not walking as much. And GPS, we're losing spatial cognitive abilities and all of this, and all of that. And then now we see with the rise of social media and what it's done to us. And so I began to do the research and kind of what the vision was showing me. And sure enough, there's a trend of a diminishment of capacities and capabilities and cognition and connection and communication that's already happened. And this is unlike any industrial revolution, because it's going to and is already replacing the one thing that is unique, or at least at the level that we understand, which is our intelligence and our communication and our ability to create and all that. And I saw this happening, and I've seen the downturn, already happening, and now people having relationships with bots and all this stuff. And it always shows up at first like a boon of productivity, efficiency. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Luddite. I love technology, but I saw very clearly we had it backwards. We are waiting to create a super intelligence, which will eventually outsource our mind and we'll become like characters in the Wall-E movie, where they're just on the conveyor belt. But we are the real super intelligence. We're the creators of it. And we're already forgetting that. Our consciousness is the real and original AI, the ancient intelligence, the ancestral intelligence, the authentic intelligence, even maybe the angelic intelligence. But our minds and our brains are really the real large language model that has been using all the data of the quantum field and building models of reality. And that's the matrix and the simulation we already live in. And we're about to build another one inside of that we will further get lost and disconnected from our real destiny as a whole new human 2.0, which is, yes, do the technology, but use it to understand and unlock our technology, our super intelligence. If you study the ancients, they were already tapping into string theory and atomic theory and all these sciences that came thousands of years later without any outer technology. We have the capacity infinitely more than any artificial intelligence, but we can use it to understand, to recognize patterns, to know ourselves. But we have to, we're investing hundreds and hundreds of billions in it. And we're investing very, very little in developing our large language model, our consciousness, our inner technology, excuse me, and our super intelligence. And so it's a movement towards our humanity is at risk. We're about to cut ourselves away even further from the real destiny, that seed pattern within us that wants to emerge. And with humans, when the truth wants to emerge, it gets projected out as something outside of us. Like all of the invention of the wheel, the invention of riding animals, carriages, cars, planes, trains, all of that is the unfoldment or emergence of the spiritual truth of omnipresence. Our consciousness is omnipresent. It's everywhere in its fullness. And right now, people may be watching this and all around the world or listening. And right now, our consciousness is all around the world. And so these technologies reveal something that is implicit. And the problem is we forget that and we think it's the technology that's giving us that ability, but it's because implicitly our consciousness is boundless. It's omnipresent. Mm-hmm. It's omnipotent. All expressions of power are just relative little expressions of the infinite perfection that we are omnipotent, all power. And so I could see that happening. And it's like, we have to come back. Let's use this to take a quantum leap, to have a super inflection point of our own potential, which we have not even scratched, although we can see evidence throughout history. So that's what the book is about on one level. And then on another level, it's about this technology is already disrupting jobs. It's going to eliminate many, many jobs. It's going to eliminate many, many ways of living and thinking and doing and being. And it's going to risk the one thing that humans can't live without, and that's meaning and purpose. When somebody loses their meaning and purpose, they literally kill themselves. And as Viktor Frankl talked about, in the one thing that kept people alive in the concentration camps was they had a real meaning and purpose and usefulness. And as AI can do everything better, faster, cheaper, which it's doing and will do, we have to understand that we have to keep connected to our purpose. That's where the emergence comes back in, and the life code and all the other stuff I teach about that. And we have to also understand that there's something about us that is irreplaceable. A robot can't replace it. An AI algorithm can't replace it. There's something placed in us that is unrepeatable, unprecedented, and we must now take all this self-help and learning our purpose and knowing who we really are out of Esalen or just the retreat centers and just the workshops on the weekend, and we have to put it at the center of our lives. It's a matter of having a job tomorrow. It's a matter of your kids having a future. It's a matter of survival and meaning. It's no longer a luxury we can just do when we're done with all the important stuff, now I can go, read a book on Eckhart Tolle or whatever, or look at the Awaken magazine. No, it's got to have to become like curriculum, like in our schools and in our lives. Not necessarily religious, but just what am I really made of? What am I really made for? What is irreplaceable about me that only I can bring? My unique, the most valuable resource in the future won't just be energy and compute. It will be your unique, embodied, lived experience. Because that is something an AI can never do until they start literally raising baby AIs into embodied people. But that's going to be a ways off. So it's like preparing people. What are those 10 evolutions we have to make and start making now, so that we have agency, we have sovereignty, we have purpose, we have meaning, we have an abundance mindset. We are thinking for ourselves instead of outsourcing our thinking. We are upgrading our heartware, so that we deepen our connection to ourselves and each other. Without love, without touch, without real human bonds, again, we fail to thrive and we die. So it's like deepening these things to survive as humans, to thrive as humans, and then also to develop what is it about you and me and Bob and Sue that makes them necessary, valuable in the world, in the marketplace, in this high-tech, low-touch world that is emerging. So it's a self-help / social commentary. It's really the first self-help guide for the AI age, basically.
Mm-hmm. A Whole New Human coming out January 2026. We'll link to that as well as your previous books. What are some ways, Derek, that people can work with you if they're resonating with your presence and your wisdom?
Yeah, if you don't think I'm too crazy already, you can obviously go to my website, DerekRydall.com, DerekRydall.com. There's lots of free stuff you can get. I give away most of my stuff for free. So there's tons of free trainings and things that can get you moving in this direction. And my podcast on YouTube or on, wherever podcasts, Emergence. So I give away most of the stuff. And if you like what you're getting and you're getting value at, and you want to go deeper into a program or some kind of live experience with me, we'll be connected through whatever it is you're doing right now. But I would say the first thing is, if you're resonating with it, go to my site, get some free stuff, go deeper into the training, and then, shoot me an email and let me know how it's going.
Awesome. Derek, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom, your stories, your vision for this next season of our world. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my honor.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.